The night had grown deep over the vast New Mexico plains, wrapping the land in a heavy silence broken only by the distant howl of a coyote and the soft rustling of the dry prairie grass. In that lonely darkness, a small, weather-beaten cabin stood like a forgotten memory of a life that had never been easy. Inside, by the faint flicker of an old kerosene lamp, sat Elias Carter, a poor rancher whose hands were roughened by years of hard labor but whose heart was gentle enough to shame the richest men alive. His dinner, a handful of beans, a piece of stale bread and a strip of jerky, lay untouched for the moment as he stared out the window into the night, lost in thoughts that stretched far beyond the reach of the lamp's glow. Life had never given him much, not money, not comfort, not security. But it had given him a sense of decency, a belief that kindness was not a currency measured in gold but in the quiet choices one made when no one was watching. That belief was all he truly owned. The ranch he lived on was barely holding together. A dozen tired-looking cattle grazed on the sparse grasslands, and 2 old horses dozed by the broken fence that leaned dangerously under the pressure of the wind. The barn roof had holes large enough for rain to walk through rather than leak. Tools were rusty, debts were high, and hope was something he tried to convince himself he still had. Yet despite the poverty and the endless struggle to keep the land alive, Elias never let bitterness enter his heart. He believed the land spoke to him, whispering reminders of endurance, humility, and the quiet reward of surviving another day. On this particular night, however, something felt different. The air was colder, heavier, as though the land itself was holding its breath for what was to come. Elias felt it too, an uneasiness creeping up his spine. He blew out the lamp and stepped outside onto the creaky wooden porch. The stars above were scattered like shattered diamonds across the wide sky, more brilliant than usual. The silence wasn't just silence. It was anticipation. He stood there in his worn boots, the cool air brushing across his face, and he wondered what tomorrow would bring. Little did he know, tomorrow would bring the greatest test of his life, the test that would etch his name into the untold stories of the Wild West. As dawn began to break, a faint golden light crawled across the horizon, spreading warmth across the cold earth. Elias stepped out once more, stretching the stiffness from his tired bones. He fed the horses, checked the cattle, and prepared for yet another day on a ranch that demanded more than he could ever give. He was halfway through fixing a loose board on his porch when he heard it. At first, a tremor, then a distant thunder, like the heartbeat of the earth growing faster. Elias froze. He tilted his head, listening. The thunder grew louder, fuller, heavier. His heart pounded. He walked to the edge of the porch and scanned the open land. Dust began to rise far in the distance, too much for cattle, too controlled to be a storm. And then he saw them. Riders, hundreds of riders. Each silhouette carried the unmistakable form of mounted warriors, bows, spears, braided hair, feathers catching the wind. A chill ran down his spine as he realized what he was seeing. Apache riders. Not 10, not 50, but hundreds, no, 1,000. Maybe more, moving like a great wave toward his ranch. For a moment, Elias forgot how to breathe. His ranch was small, insignificant. Why would an entire force of Apache warriors descend upon a poor man with nothing worth taking? Fear told him to run, to hide, to find a weapon. But survival wasn't what his instincts whispered. Kindness was. He had never wronged anyone. Maybe, just maybe, today that mattered. As the riders approached, the dust storm around them thickened, turning the rising sun into a blur. Elias stood alone in front of his tiny cabin, his hands steady, his mind racing. The first row of Apache warriors came into clear view. Their painted faces were stern, unreadable. Their horses snorted and pawed at the dry earth. Spears glinted in the golden light. The sight was overwhelming, like a tide of history washing over a single man, and yet Elias did not back away. One warrior stepped forward, mounted on a tall, powerful horse. His presence was commanding, his posture dignified, his dark eyes piercing like a hawk's. Elias recognized him. Immediately, Chief Nantan Loco, a respected Apache leader, known for his fierce loyalty to his tribe and his unwavering code of honor. Elias had seen him only once before, months ago, under very different circumstances. That memory came rushing back now. It was late autumn when Elias was riding home from the trading post, his horse tired and the wind bitterly cold. As he approached a rocky pass, he spotted something unusual, a lone Apache boy lying unconscious beside a fallen horse. The child was no older than 12. He was bleeding, pale, and barely breathing. Elias looked around terrified. Helping an Apache child could mean offending the tribe. Leaving him there meant certain death. The world might have expected Elias to protect himself, to avoid trouble, to walk away, but that wasn't who he was. He dismounted, carried the boy onto his own horse, and rode straight back to his cabin. For 3 days and nights, Elias tended the injured child, feeding him broth, cleaning his wounds, and praying silently for his recovery. When the boy finally opened his eyes, frightened and confused, Elias calmed him gently and offered him food. The language barrier didn't matter. Kindness spoke louder. On the 4th day, a group of Apache warriors rode to Elias's ranch, led by the boy's father, Chief Nantan Loco. The moment the chief saw his son alive, safe, and recovering, he lowered his weapon and placed a hand over his heart, a gesture of gratitude deeper than words. Elias expected a reward, or at least some token of thanks, but the chief had said only one thing before leaving: "You will not be forgotten." Elias had not thought about those words in months, until this dawn. Now facing 1,000 warriors, Elias understood. The chief rode closer, and the warriors parted around him like a river around a stone. The chief's expression was steady, solemn yet warm beneath the sternness. Elias bowed his head respectfully. The chief lifted his hand. "Elias Carter," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "You showed mercy when you had nothing. You gave life when the world gives death. Today, the Apache nation stands on your land, not as enemies, but as witnesses to your heart." Elias blinked, taken aback. I only did what any decent man should do," he stammered. "No," the chief replied. "Not every man does what is right. Many choose fear. You chose honor." The warriors behind him nodded, hundreds of eyes watching Elias with a mixture of respect and recognition. Elias felt small, smaller than ever, but also seen in a way he never had been before. Then the chief continued, "My son tells us you saved him. You gave him warmth. You gave him food. You gave him another sunrise. Today we give you ours." He motioned toward the vast group of riders. "Look at them, Elias. 1,000 Apache warriors have come at dawn to honor a poor rancher whose kindness reached our hearts." Elias felt emotion welling in his chest, confusion, humility, disbelief. "I don't understand," he whispered. The chief smiled slightly, a rare sight. "You will." He lifted his spear high into the air. The warriors echoed the gesture, raising their weapons, their voices rising into a powerful, thunderous chant that shook the very morning sky. It wasn't a war cry. It was a celebration, a tribute to him. Elias stood on his porch, heart trembling, eyes burning. For a man who owned almost nothing, this was a treasure greater than gold, a moment no amount of wealth could buy. The chief lowered his spear and said, "Come, there is more to be done today." And with that, the greatest dawn of Elias Carter's life truly began. Elias Carter followed Chief Nantan Loco with hesitant steps, still overwhelmed by the sight of nearly 1,000 Apache warriors spread across his humble ranch like a living sea of history. The rising sun cast a golden glow upon the gathering, turning the dust in the air into tiny sparks of light that danced around the horses' hoofs. Elias felt as though he was walking through a dream, one so grand and unexpected that his mind struggled to accept it as reality. He kept glancing back at his small cabin, the peeling wood, the sagging porch, the crooked door, and wondered how such a broken place could become the center of a moment this monumental. The chief dismounted and the warriors around him followed, moving with a grace and unity that mesmerized Elias. No man yelled. No man rushed. It was as if each of them understood why they were there, even if Elias didn't. Chief Nantan Loco placed a firm hand on Elias's shoulder. "Today your land becomes sacred for a moment," he said, his voice carrying the weight of generations, "because honor brings honor back." Elias swallowed hard, unsure what to say, but the chief continued walking, guiding him toward the open plains behind the ranch. As they stepped farther from the cabin, the warriors parted in silence, creating a corridor of respect. Elias could feel their eyes on him, not judging, not suspicious, but acknowledging him as though he were part of something much larger than his own life. He didn't know where they were going, but he followed. After several minutes, they reached a wide circle drawn into the earth, a ceremonial ground freshly marked with careful lines and symbols. Elias had seen such circles from a distance before, during rare Apache gatherings, but he had never imagined he would stand inside one. A group of elders approached, their faces painted with wisdom and time, their steps slow but purposeful. One elder held a bundle wrapped in deer hide. Another carried a carved wooden bowl filled with sage leaves. They stood in front of Elias and the chief. The chief spoke first. "Months ago, my son lay between life and death," he said, his voice carrying across the silent circle. "You, a man with no reason to trust us, a man with little to offer, chose to protect him. You could have left him. Many would have, but you did not." His voice softened. "You did what a warrior does. You guarded life." Elias felt his throat tighten. "I only did what felt right," he whispered, but the chief shook his head. "Right is not always chosen. But you chose it." The elder stepped forward and unwrapped the deer hide bundle. Inside was a necklace, intricate, handcrafted, adorned with turquoise beads, bear claws, and a circular carving representing the rising sun. It was beautiful, but it was also unmistakably sacred. Elias stared at it with disbelief. The elder lifted it with both hands and said, "This is the Nyasa Tokali, the dawn spirit emblem. It is given only to those who have brought light to our people." Elias raised his hands in protest. "I can't accept that. I'm just—" But the elder touched the center of his chest with surprising strength. "You are a man who gave dawn back to a dying child. You cannot deny what you have already done." Slowly, reluctantly, Elias lowered his hands, and the elder placed the emblem around his neck. The beads were cool against his skin, but he felt warmth beneath them, like a heartbeat that wasn't his. The chief nodded approvingly. "Now there is something we must show you." He gestured for Elias to follow him, toward the far edge of the circle. As Elias approached, he noticed several warriors standing guard around a large mound of earth. The chief motioned for them to step aside, and they did. Beneath a heavy tarp crafted from buffalo hide lay something massive, its shape long and rectangular. Elias's brow furrowed. "What is that?" he asked. The chief gripped the edge of the tarp and said, "A gift from the Apache nation." He pulled the tarp away. Elias staggered back. Under it lay a collection of tools, brand new iron plows, axes, saws, hammers, shovels, and bags of seed. Next to them stood 10 sturdy wooden crates filled with dry goods. Flour, beans, sugar, oats. Beside the crates were 8 strong, healthy horses, their bridles decorated with Apache beadwork. Elias felt dizzy. The tools alone were worth more than his entire ranch. The horses were priceless. No, I can't take this," he whispered, shaking his head. "This is too much. I didn't save the boy for reward." Chief Nantan Loco stepped closer, his voice low and powerful. "This is not a reward. This is balance. The world takes much from men like you. Today it gives something back." Elias's eyes burned. He covered his face with both hands, overwhelmed by gratitude, disbelief and fear all at once. But the chief wasn't finished. He raised his hand and shouted something in Apache. The thunder of thousands of hooves echoed once more, as the entire force of warriors shifted, forming a wider circle around the ranch. Elias lowered his hands, confused. The chief turned to him. "There is one more thing the Apache nation will do for you today." He pointed toward the broken fence, the leaning barn, the half-collapsed stable. "We will rebuild your home." Elias's jaw dropped. What? The chief smiled. "A man who rebuilds a life deserves a home that can stand." Before Elias could respond, the entire field erupted into motion. Hundreds of warriors dismounted, spreading out across the ranch with purpose. Some began repairing the fence with the new tools. Others cleared debris, stacked wood, and reinforced the barns. The sound of axes striking wood, hammers pounding nails, horses snorting, and voices calling instructions filled the air. It was a symphony of unity, a force greater than anything Elias had ever witnessed. He watched in awe as the tribe worked with speed and precision, transforming his broken ranch into something strong, something worthy, something alive. Meanwhile, the chief guided Elias to the shade of a tall juniper tree. "Sit," he said. "Today is not for work. Today is for understanding." Elias sat, still trembling with emotion. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why would 1,000 warriors come for someone like me?" The chief folded his arms. "The world believes strength is measured in power, in wealth, in force. But the Apache measure strength in heart. You gave us a piece of yours." He looked toward the horizon. "Many white men came to this land and saw only what they could take, but you You saw a child and chose to give. Elias stared at the ground. But I'm nobody, he murmured. The chief shook his head. A man who thinks he is nobody is often the one the spirits watch closest. As the hours passed, the ranch transformed. The fence gleamed with fresh wood. The barn stood straight and tall. The cabin was repaired, roof patched, walls reinforced, windows fixed. The warriors even built him a new water trough and a smokehouse. Elias felt as though he were witnessing the resurrection of his own life. And through it all, he couldn't stop thinking about the boy he had saved. As if summoned by his thoughts, the child emerged from the crowd riding a small pony, his braided hair shining in the sunlight. He dismounted shyly and walked toward Elias, carrying something wrapped in cloth. He extended it with both hands. Elias opened it carefully and found a small stone, carving of a hand holding a flame. The boy spoke softly in broken English. You gave me fire when I was cold, life when I was dying, heart when I was alone. Elias felt tears spill from his eyes as he pulled the boy into a gentle embrace. You would have done the same, he whispered. The boy shook his head. Maybe, but you did it first. As afternoon stretched into late day, the work finally halted. The ranch now looked stronger than it ever had. The chief raised his hand once more, and the warriors gathered behind him, forming a mountain of strength under the crimson sky. Chief Nantan Loco turned to Elias. Today our debt is balanced, but our respect remains. He stepped closer. If ever the Apache nation rides at dawn again, it will be because your name calls us. Elias couldn't speak. He could only nod, overwhelmed beyond words. The chief climbed onto his horse and shouted a command. The warriors mounted with lightning speed. Dust lifted, sunlight glinted off spears, and the ground shook as 1,000 Apache warriors rode away in a stunning wave of motion, their silhouettes fading into the horizon like a living legend. Elias stood alone in the golden dust, staring at the ranch they had rebuilt, the tools they had given, the necklace on his chest, the carving in his hand. His life had changed in a single dawn, transformed not by wealth, not by luck, but by the return of a kindness he had offered freely, expecting nothing. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and red. Elias whispered into the wind, "Thank you." A whisper of wind brushed across his face as if answering. And so the story of the poor rancher whose kindness brought 1,000 Apache warriors to his land became a tale that echoed across the West, one that reminded all who heard it that the smallest act of compassion can create ripples strong enough to shake the world. And as Elias walked back toward his rebuilt cabin, he smiled for the first time in a long time, not because life had finally given him something, but because he finally understood the power of giving without expecting.